While all dungeon bosses in Final Fantasy XIV are pretty much easy enough that we should always succeed on them eventually, some of them are definitely harder than others. So here I have collected 10 of the hardest individual dungeon bosses. Who knows, maybe you will discover a dungeon you didn't even know existed as a result. After going through all of the dungeons one by one, it probably comes as no surprise that a lot of dungeons didn't hold a single boss that would even make an honorable mention. But even with that, I still had to cut a lot of dungeons to get the top 10 hardest. So if you feel like I didn't even mention one that you felt like deserved it, that would be why. There are a lot of those. Which also conveniently leads us to number 10. Vanaspati Svabanu. This boss fight has multiple mechanics that can instantly kill you for just one infraction, which is somewhat rare in dungeons. Sometimes the Crumbling Skies intermission can catch just the wrong players off guard and suddenly you're in a lot of trouble. But with the advent of Phoenix Downs in dungeons, this is much less of a problem than it used to be. Ethereal Disruption can easily lead to some unexpected deaths with the culminating combo of knockbacks, line AoEs to watch for, and spread markers. I'm not sure if this still happens, but in the past, mechanics that put the tail on your screen like this would sometimes just not show for some players, which could make the mechanic impossible to resolve correctly reliably. Number 9. Arf's Asian Prime. Dual Star is the specific mechanic that causes problems, and just happens to resolve in a fast 1-2 quickly enough that it can surprise especially newer players, but also players that just generally are not used to dungeons requiring this quick of a move. The mechanic causes problems regularly enough that it is worth mentioning that stepping out to dodge the fireballs and just letting yourself get hit by the ice donut is, for many groups, an acceptable solution. A quick honorable mention here is the second boss Harmachis and its ballistic missile, which requires exactly 2 players to stand in the enumeration, or it does a ludicrous amount of damage to everyone involved. Number 8. The Burns Mist Dragon. A couple of mechanics in this fight can ice cube you and require help to escape early. Not a lot of help, but help nonetheless. During the intermission, while the boss is vaporized, even accidentally hitting the boss also cubes you. Granted, getting cubed only lasts a short while, so even if the whole party goofs it, it should still be survivable. Probably. The other problem in this fight is specifically that several mechanics apply a rather heavy dot. Heavy enough that healers may feel compelled to eschew it, and getting cubed tends to also apply this dot. So hey, you might just die before you escape without help. Number 7. Dohn Mheg's Griaule. Whenever the boss uses fodder, it spawns an ad for each player in the party, +1. Each ad shoots a tether towards the boss that players have to intercept. Each tether grants a stack of a buff. If the boss hits 5 stacks of this buff, then its auto attacks will do one-shotting amounts of damage on every swing and the next timber will be a party wipe. In an average group, this fight is short enough that only 2 waves of ads will come, but if only 1 or 2 players are doing the tethers properly, that can actually be a huge problem. In a way, this makes the boss a DPS check, albeit a somewhat irrelevant one when players are doing the mechanics right. Number 6. Skydeep Cenote's Maul Skull. While none of the boss mechanics are super complex or fast in their own right, the boss constantly barrages the party with mechanics that can one-shot or two-shot. A specific one is the Stone Carver mechanic, where the boss charges its fists up and then do half rooms one after the other. And yes, this can instantly wipe a player off the field. This mechanic alone is not really a big deal, as you can easily dodge it when you see it, but once the fight gets underway, the boss will typically prepare Stone Carver during other mechanics to draw your eyes away from it, and this can mean that you get forced to pick getting knocked left or right, and if you get knocked the wrong way, you may not have enough time to dodge the half room in time. Essentially, the boss is super punishing if it gets you. Number 5. Heroes Gauntlet's Spectral Berserker. Similar to Maul Skull, what really highlights this boss is that it is not shy to one-shot you for a small infraction. Falling rocks into wild anguish is itself not a very hard mechanic to resolve, but each individual, even when done correctly, takes quite a lot of damage. Furthermore, if players don't position appropriately in time, 2 rocks being too close can mean that someone will just have to die. Additionally, while this mechanic only happens like twice, Wild Rampage pretty much one-shots anyone that don't do the mechanic correctly. And stepping into the crater too early can be a problem, stepping into it too late can absolutely be a problem, and for some players, how deep into the crater you need to go can be unintuitive. In a way, what makes this boss so difficult is more mean mechanics. Mechanics where it gets you specifically because you weren't ready the first time. Number 4. Amaurot's First Beast. The combo of having to place the comet to have safe spots to hide for the final sky mechanic means that some parties might just wipe because they didn't realize or forgot. On top of that, the fact the final sky tends to straight up kill makes for a very punishing mechanic. The following buildings falling that also can kill makes the mechanic even more brutal. While the buildings only fall twice, the fight usually ends in time for that to not matter if it goes well. And if it goes badly, the fact that buildings stop dropping tends to be redundant anyway. A somewhat honorable mention also goes to the final boss, Aetherion, but this is actually more because of a misleading detail of the fight. As the fight progresses, the boss jumps closer and closer, implying that eventually the boss will just shove you off the arena. However, the boss will actually stop at the last bit, meaning the true quote-unquote hardened rage is running out of side platforms to dodge apocalypses. However, a healer can heal through the damage and a tank can easily survive it, making the fight a lot less threatening than you expect once you realize this. Number 3. Haukke Manor Heart's Halicarnassus. Hilariously, what makes this fight hard is actually how easy it is. As the fight progresses, the boss will summon adds, and after a set amount of time, or she gets pushed to a certain HP threshold, she will consume the add to gain buffs and use Blood Rain, which deals damage seemingly based on how healthy the enemies she absorbed were. In an average party, the boss fight will commence for a moment, after which the boss will get stuck falling behind a checklist, summoning adds, consuming them, doing a mechanic, summoning adds, consuming them, doing a mechanic, super quickly, however, at such a pace that by the time Lady Amandine, the final add, spawns, she is pretty much already past the HP threshold to consume her immediately, and if that happens, the Blood Rain will deal enough damage to wipe a party. One way to resolve it is of course to just slow down. Another way is that Tank Limit Break makes it survivable, and if you add in a barrier or something, you might actually be alright. In fact, it might actually, come to think of it, make sense to rank this fight lower simply because due to this memey result of the fight, it has become somewhat notorious for it, so less parties get surprised by it. Number 2. Dead End's Caustic Grebulov. Necrosis is the overarching mechanic that makes this one brutal, as the boss almost just barrages you with stuff that can apply it. While that's not entirely accurate, as it is just 2 mechanics, the sequence of mechanics is entirely focused on it. Miasmata pushes a pattern of AoE that apply necrosis, and does a ton of damage, across the arena, and if you aren't positioned with the wind in your back, it may be almost impossible to avoid. Cough Up places 3 sets of baited AoEs, forcing players apart, immediately followed by Friendship Doritos, requiring players to get close again. Otherwise, they get the Hysteria debuff, making it difficult to avoid what comes next, which is a donut AoE that also applies Necrosis. Granted, this can be avoided even after Hysteria if you're playing a job with a fast gap closer, like Onslaught. That said, the party repeatedly receiving the debuff can massively clog the healer's ability to do things other than Ishuna, and if the damage happens to catch up with the healer's ability to, well, heal, then you have to choose between saving the team from dying of necrosis or dying of no HP syndrome. Admittedly, both of the other bosses in this dungeon also have their scary parts, but Grebulov is definitely, by far, the meanest of the 3. Before revealing the first place, I would like to talk about some honorable mentions, and I have a few of those. Pharos Sirius, both Simon the Unsinkable and Zu. Both of these bosses are manageable enough that even when things go completely sideways, most parties survive due to most of the bosses in the dungeon being glass cannons. However, if you don't attack the ads on Xymond immediately, things can get sketchy quickly. For Zoo, what usually gets teams is when the boss leaves and you have to break an egg to get it back down. What almost always happens is that a lot of eggs are broken. Not just when needed, but just in general, which makes the Zoo absolutely furious, making it do more damage, and notably enabling its AoE stunning body slam, which can make the fight suddenly feel almost impossible to win in time. Tam-Tara Deepcroft, hard. Liavine is a very easy fight, as all you have to do is attack the boss and stand together. Ignore everything. The problem is that this goes against everything most players learn, and if you attack the zombies, it causes problems. If you run away with the spread marker, it causes problems. This makes an incredibly easy fight somehow difficult. The second boss, the Spare Body, similarly has some evil shenanigans, so take note that you can heal the Lalafell there, preventing a potential wipe. St. Mocciannes Arboretum, hard. Tokapchi, the final boss, spawns these small mud balls that grow bigger if they're hit by any mud-related mechanics. While this won't wipe a party on its own, ignoring these small mud balls can both make the fight a lot harder due to the sheer amount of party damage it can deal, but also as it can inflict damage down as a result. Grand Cosmos, Lugus furniture mechanic. If players are not careful to protect the furniture, they can end up with too little furniture to survive the second mortal flame. Granted, due to the Phoenix Down changes, as long as just one person lives that has Phoenix Down, it is somewhat manageable, and the boss only does this mechanic twice in total. But it does make for an otherwise somewhat easy fight to become surprisingly threatening. Fell Court of Troia. Scarmiglione, while not having one particularly difficult mechanic, sort of has a soft enrage in a way. As the fight progresses, the outer fences will gradually rot away, faster if players aren't careful, and once they're all gone, then it will be impossible to avoid landing in the soup out there when the knockback happens. Slower parties where this could become a problem likely features healers that would also find this damage over time overwhelming to deal with in the first place. Yuweyawata Field Station. Lunipiati is simply, among all the fights that just have painful mechanics, one of the meaner ones. It doesn't have anything that one-shots you or heavily knowledge checks you, but does require a lot of moving around and places a large hole in the middle of the arena, which can make for a much tougher fight. And with that final honorable mention out of the way, let's get on to number 1. Strayborough Deadwalk's Leonog I. Now, to be fair, with gear this has gotten a lot easier to stomach. But at launch of Dawntrail, Strayborough Deadwalk, which I like to refer to as simply Ghost Park, was a dungeon that a significant amount of players would outright leave on sight, and it was all thanks to Leonog, as the second and final boss did just not get even remotely close to the frustrations a lot of players had with Leonog. What makes Leonog such a menace is, of course, the children. Practically speaking, the children are effectively identical to any other slow-moving projectile that you could run into in any other duty, like for instance the pink balls in the near raids. The key difference with the children to any other mechanic like this is that the punishment is much, much greater with the children, which makes an accidental bump so much more painful to deal with. How infuriating this mechanic can get may also depend greatly on player latency, as higher latencies can make it much harder to know exactly how early you have to move to dodge in time. And the only real tip I could possibly give for this mechanic is that in each pair of runs of the children, the first run they will dash at the furthest away player, and on the run back they dash at the closest player. The main benefit of knowing this is that having a ranged DPS and the healer, for instance, on opposing ends of the arena with the rest of the party in the center means that you can almost perfectly predict where the children will pass through, and aside from a stray or two, they should all miss most of the center, leaving some pretty obvious safe spots so you won't even need to think of when to step aside to dodge the children in time. Which dungeon boss do you think is the hardest in Final Fantasy XIV? I would love to hear the what and the why in the comments, and now don't you go cheating and use a criterion, boss, that's different! Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, in patch 7.3 of Dawntrail, Phoenix Downs were massively buffed to now not be unique and be usable in many casual situations, which, among other things, massively reduced the stakes in a dungeon context, as anyone could at least arrest someone else once in a tight spot.